I'm Kurt, 32, a software engineer who built a tech company from scratch. My parents mastered emotional abandonment since I was a kid. The pinnacle? Skipping my wedding to Eliza for a Mediterranean cruise. But when I posted my new Porsche on Instagram, suddenly mom's calling, "Family meeting tomorrow." Their sudden interest after years of absence wasn't coincidental. I showed up with something they never expected, not money, but a different kind of currency. Before I dive into this story, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button. You won't want to miss what happened when I pulled into their driveway. Growing up in Wellesley, a pristine suburb of Boston, my childhood looked perfect from the outside. Our colonial-style house with its manicured lawn was exactly what my parents, Thomas and Margaret Wilson, wanted, a showcase of upper-middle-class success. Dad worked 80-hour weeks as an investment banker at a prestigious firm downtown, while Mom dedicated herself to climbing the social ladder of our community with ruthless determination. From my earliest memories, I understood that appearances mattered more than anything in our household. Dad's rare appearances at home were punctuated by phone calls and business discussions. Mom was physically present but mentally cataloging neighborhood status rankings or planning her next charity committee takeover. Neither seemed particularly interested in my existence beyond ensuring I didn't embarrass them at social functions. My siblings had it different. Stephanie, 6 years older, was Mom's pride, beautiful, socially adept, and headed for an Ivy League school. James, 4 years my senior, was Dad's investment, athletic, charismatic, destined to follow him into finance. Then there was me, the afterthought child, quiet and fascinated by how things worked rather than how things looked. Computers became my escape around age 8 when Dad brought home an outdated desktop from his office. While the machine was obsolete for business, it opened an entire universe for me. I would spend hours learning programming languages from library books, while my parents attended galas and my siblings collected accolades. One memory stands out with painful clarity. My 10th birthday fell on the same day as an exclusive country club event. Mom and Dad had secured invitations after years of networking. "We'll celebrate this weekend," Mom promised while applying her makeup, not making eye contact. That weekend came and went without mention of my birthday. When I quietly reminded them Sunday night, Mom looked genuinely surprised before slipping $50 under my napkin at breakfast Monday morning. "Get yourself something nice," she said before returning to her social calendar. By 13, I had built my first rudimentary program, a simple game that made my computer science teacher take notice. When I showed my parents, Dad glanced up from his financial papers. "Computers are a good hobby, but don't get distracted from real academics," he said before returning to his work. Mom merely nodded, more concerned with Stephanie's college applications. High school brought academic success in science and mathematics that my parents regarded with mild approval at best. While they attended every one of James's football games and Stephanie's debate competitions, they found excuses to miss my technology competitions. When my coding team won the state championship, I called home excited. "That's nice, Kurt," Mom said. "Did you remember to pick up your father's dry cleaning on your way home?" Their pattern was clear and consistent. Physical needs met, emotional presence absent. I had a roof, food, clothes, and education, which in their minds fulfilled their parental obligations. Anything beyond that, validation, encouragement, genuine interest, seemed unnecessary luxuries they couldn't afford, despite our material wealth. By 17, I had stopped expecting them to show up, literally or figuratively. While they discussed James's business school prospects over dinner, I quietly made plans to apply for scholarships. While they framed Stephanie's acceptance letter to Harvard, I researched computer science programs and coding internships. I built a shell of self-reliance around myself, determined to succeed not to gain their approval, but to create a life where their approval no longer mattered. The night before leaving for college, I sat alone on our back porch, making myself a private promise that would guide my next decade. I would build something meaningful on my own terms. I would create success that didn't require their validation. Most importantly, I would become the kind of person who showed up for people who mattered to me. What I couldn't have known that night was how thoroughly I would fulfill that promise, or how ironically their sudden interest would arrive only after I had stopped seeking it. MIT's acceptance letter arrived on a rainy April afternoon during my senior year of high school. The substantial scholarship that accompanied it meant I could attend without financial help from my parents, a detail that mattered deeply to my pride. When I announced the news at dinner, Mom said, "That's nice, though Harvard would have been better for connections," before asking James about his summer internship plans. Dad merely nodded, mentioning that those computer people occasionally made decent money if they landed at the right companies. Moving to Cambridge that fall felt like exhaling after holding my breath for 18 years. My dormitory was chaotic, cramped, and filled with minds buzzing with ideas and innovation. For the first time, my passion for technology wasn't something to be tolerated but celebrated. I found my people, other students who stayed up until 3 in the morning debating algorithms and dreaming of changing the world through code. During orientation week, I met Ryan Foster in the computer lab. He had grown up in Seattle with parents who worked at Microsoft, but wanted to forge his own path. Where I was methodical and detail-oriented, Ryan was visionary and charismatic. He could translate complex technical concepts into language that made non-tech people excited. We became inseparable, pulling all-nighters on projects and pushing each other to think bigger. By sophomore year, Ryan and I developed our first successful app, a simple file-sharing platform that gained popularity across campus. When it reached 10,000 users, I called home, hoping they might finally understand what I was building. "That's an impressive number," Dad said, distracted. "But what's the monetization strategy?" When I tried explaining our growth-first approach, he cut me off to take a work call. Mom didn't quite grasp what an app was, asking if it was like a website before changing the subject to Stephanie's engagement to a surgical resident. Junior year brought advanced courses in cybersecurity that captured my interest. While many classmates focused on consumer applications, I became fascinated with protecting digital infrastructure. Ryan and I began developing security protocols that addressed vulnerabilities we identified in existing systems. Our professors took notice, connecting us with industry contacts and research opportunities. During my senior year, the Northeast Technology Conference came to Boston. Ryan convinced me to attend a networking event where I met Eliza Taylor, a brilliant cybersecurity analyst working for a defense contractor. She had dark, curly hair, intense brown eyes, and a mind that could dismantle complex security problems with elegant efficiency. When she challenged an assertion I made about encryption protocols, I was simultaneously intimidated and captivated. Our first date was at a hole-in-the-wall coffee shop near MIT where we talked for 6 hours straight. Eliza understood my passion for technology in a way no one besides Ryan ever had. More importantly, she listened when I spoke, really listened, with genuine interest that made me feel visible in a way my family never had. Graduation approached with job offers for both Ryan and me from established tech companies. My parents attended the ceremony, sitting stiffly in their designated seats. "A computer science degree is certainly practical these days," Dad commented afterward, as though I'd chosen a sensible appliance rather than pursued my passion. Mom asked when I would start looking for a real apartment now that I'd be earning actual money. Instead of accepting those corporate offers, Ryan and I made the terrifying decision to launch our own cybersecurity firm. We rented a tiny office space in Cambridge with money from the app we'd sold to a larger company. Eliza supported the decision wholeheartedly, even though it meant uncertain income and grueling hours. Those early startup days tested everything: my technical skills, my resilience, my relationship with Eliza. We survived on ramen and coffee, pitching our services to companies that often didn't understand why they needed advanced security protocols. Ryan's ability to translate our work into business benefits gradually opened doors, while my technical innovations gave us unique offerings in the marketplace. Eliza stood by me through it all, bringing dinner to the office at midnight and offering critical feedback on our security frameworks. When we were turned down by the 7th potential client in 1 month, she helped me redesign our entire presentation approach. When I doubted our decision to turn down stable jobs, she reminded me of the vision that had driven us to start our company. 18 months into our venture, we secured our first major client, a financial services firm that had experienced a significant data breach. Our security solution not only fixed their immediate problem, but established a protocol that prevented future vulnerabilities. Word spread through the industry. Within 6 months, we had hired our first employees. By the 3-year mark, we had an office with 20 staff members and a growing reputation for innovative security solutions. When we landed a contract with a Fortune 1000 company, I called my parents, hoping they might finally recognize what I was building. Dad seemed moderately impressed but quickly pivoted to advice about tax structures and investment strategies for when you sell the company. Mom asked if this meant I could afford to buy a house in a good neighborhood. Neither asked about the technology itself or the years of work that had led to this milestone. For our 5th anniversary, we held a company celebration at a rooftop venue in Boston. I sent formal invitations to my parents, hoping they might attend and finally see what I had built. They sent a generic congratulations card with a gift certificate to a steakhouse chain. James came for an hour, clearly uncomfortable among tech people but making a minimal effort. Stephanie sent her regrets, citing her children's activities. As I watched Ryan's parents proudly mingling with our team members, the contrast was painful but clarifying. My family's absence at significant moments had become so expected that it barely registered as disappointment anymore. What mattered was the family I was choosing to build: Ryan, Eliza, our team, and the community of innovators we had joined. 5 years into building our company, I had found professional success, a partner who truly saw me, and a best friend who shared my vision. The absence of parental approval had ceased to be the void I organized my life around. Or so I thought, until Eliza and I decided to get married, and I found myself hoping, one last time, that my parents might show up for a moment that mattered. After 5 years together, I proposed to Eliza during a weekend trip to Maine. We were walking along a rocky coastline at sunset when I asked her to build a life with me. She said yes immediately, her eyes filled with certainty that reflected my own. That evening, as we celebrated over dinner, Eliza gently asked about involving my family in our wedding plans. Despite years of disappointment, some stubborn part of me saw our wedding as a potential fresh start with my parents. Maybe this time will be different, I told Eliza, trying to convince myself as much as her. A wedding is the kind of traditional milestone they understand. 2 weeks later, I drove to my parents' house in Wellesley rather than calling. Mom seemed surprised to see me on their doorstep but invited me in for coffee. Dad was home, unusual for a Wednesday afternoon, reviewing investment portfolios in his study. The house hadn't changed. The same perfectly arranged furniture. The same family photos where I always seemed to be standing slightly apart from everyone else. Eliza and I are getting married, I announced once we were all seated in the living room. We're planning the ceremony for next June. Mom's response was immediate. June is the busiest month for weddings. Have you considered May or September? Better availability and often better rates. Dad looked up briefly from his tablet. Congratulations. Will her parents be contributing financially? Wedding costs can spiral quickly. No questions about Eliza herself, though they'd met her 3 times over the years. No expression of happiness for my milestone. Just practical considerations and financial calculations. Still, I pressed forward. We'd like to have the ceremony in Boston. It would mean a lot to have you both involved in the planning. Mom tapped her fingernails against her coffee cup. Well, we'll have to check our calendar. The summer is quite busy with the club events and your father's business travel. I left their house with a familiar knot in my stomach, but refused to surrender my optimism. Eliza suggested we involve them in small, manageable ways, perhaps asking Mom's opinion on invitations or Dad's thoughts on venue options. Over the next several months, I made consistent efforts to include them. I emailed photos of potential venues, inviting their input. Dad replied once, asking about the cost per guest. I sent samples of invitation designs. Mom responded that they all looked very nice without expressing a preference. I called to ask if they'd like to meet Eliza's parents before the wedding. They cited scheduling difficulties. 6 months into planning, I began to accept what Eliza had gently tried to prepare me for. My parents had no intention of engaging meaningfully with our wedding. They responded to direct questions but initiated nothing. They expressed no interest in the details that consumed our evenings and weekends. Most tellingly, they never once asked how they could help or what would make the day special for us. 8 weeks before the wedding date, I made a final attempt. I called on a Sunday afternoon, when I knew they'd be home after church. "I wanted to confirm you'll be at the wedding," I said, trying to keep my voice casual. "We need to finalize the seating arrangements and head count for the caterer." A brief silence followed before Mom spoke. "Oh, Kurt, I meant to call you. Your father and I have booked that Mediterranean cruise we've been talking about for years. The dates conflict with your wedding weekend. The cruise they'd never once mentioned in our wedding discussions. The cruise that happened to fall exactly on the weekend of their only son's wedding." "I see," I managed to say. "That's unfortunate timing. These premium packages book up so quickly," Mom continued, her voice bright. "And you know how difficult it is for your father to take time away from work. When this opportunity came up, we really couldn't pass it up." Dad got on the extension. "We'll send a nice gift, of course. I'm sure the day will be wonderful." I hung up feeling a strange mixture of heartbreak and clarity. Eliza found me sitting silently in our apartment and knew immediately what had happened. She held me while I finally released the last remnants of a childish hope that someday, somehow, I would matter enough for them to show up. "Family is who shows up," she whispered, wiping my tears. "And you have family who will be there, Kurt. Real family." She was right. Ryan had been honored to accept my request to be my best man. His parents had helped with vendor recommendations and insisted on hosting the rehearsal dinner. Eliza's large, boisterous family had embraced me completely, her father calling regularly just to check how I was handling wedding stress. My team at work had organized a surprise bachelor weekend that made me feel more valued than any interaction I'd ever had with my blood relatives. Our wedding day arrived warm and sunny. Standing in the getting ready room with Ryan and my groomsmen, I felt a momentary pang when I saw fathers helping sons with boadies and cufflinks in neighboring rooms. Ryan noticed and squeezed my shoulder before perfectly adjusting my tie. "They're lost today, brother," he said simply. "Their tremendous loss." When the moment came to walk down the aisle, I had asked Eliza's father if he would escort me as well as his daughter. This kind man, who had shown me more paternal interest in 5 years than my father had in 30, didn't hesitate to agree. He stood proudly between Eliza and me, a hand on each of our shoulders, before walking us both toward our future. The ceremony was everything we had hoped for: intimate, meaningful, surrounded by people who genuinely celebrated our union. During the reception, Ryan's toast brought tears to my eyes. "Family isn't just blood," he said, raising his glass. "Family is who sees you at your worst and still shows up at your best. Family is who celebrates your victories as their own. Kurt, you have built your family through the strength of your character and the generosity of your heart. I am proud to stand here as your brother in everything but name." Later that night, as Eliza and I swayed on the dance floor surrounded by genuine love and support, I realized I had finally stopped looking over my shoulder for approval that would never come. The absence of my parents no longer felt like a void, but like space cleared for something better. In the months after our wedding, my parents sent a crystal vase from an expensive department store with a generic card. I called to thank them and inquire about their cruise. Mom chatted enthusiastically about Mediterranean ports, while never once asking about our honeymoon or the wedding itself. After that conversation, contact dwindled to holiday text messages and occasional emails. I had finally accepted the family I had, rather than longing for the one I'd never have. What I couldn't have anticipated was how my parents' interest would suddenly reactivate when money entered the equation. 2 years after our wedding, the company Ryan and I had built was experiencing explosive growth. Our proprietary security protocol had caught the attention of major players in the financial sector after we helped a mid-sized bank prevent what could have been a catastrophic data breach. When the story made industry news, our phones started ringing constantly. The breakthrough came when Meridian Financial Group, a Fortune 500 company with global operations, approached us about implementing our security framework across their entire system. The contract was worth more than all our previous work combined. The night we signed the paperwork, Ryan and I sat in our office in stunned silence before erupting into laughter that bordered on hysteria. "We actually did it," Ryan kept saying, shaking his head in disbelief. "We did," I confirmed, thinking of all the nights we'd worked until dawn, the rejected pitches, the times we'd nearly given up. Within 6 months of the Meridian deal, our company valuation hit $50 million. We moved from our modest office space to a renovated industrial building in downtown Boston. Our team expanded from 30 to 75 people. Industry publications began featuring our work, and competitors started trying to recruit our top talent with enormous salary offers. Despite this success, Eliza and I maintained a relatively modest lifestyle. We bought a comfortable but not extravagant condo in Cambridge and continued our habit of Friday night takeout and movie marathons. We invested most of our earnings back into the company or into long-term savings. The one splurge we allowed ourselves was traveling, taking 2 weeks each year to explore places we'd always wanted to see. One evening over dinner, Eliza shared news that shifted my perspective on everything. She was pregnant. After the initial shock wore off, overwhelming joy took its place. As we talked late into the night about our future as parents, I found myself reflecting on my own childhood and making silent promises to our unborn child. "I will see you," I whispered later that night, my hand on Eliza's still flat stomach. "I will show up for every moment that matters, and even the ones that don't." This impending shift toward parenthood made me reflective about my own journey. For years, I'd focused entirely on building our company and our marriage, channeling my energy into proving something to myself rather than to my parents. Now, with a child on the way, I felt a sense of completion in that chapter of my life. Perhaps that's why, when Ryan suggested I finally buy something just for myself to celebrate our success, the idea resonated differently than it would have before. "You've earned it," he insisted during a rare, quiet lunch. "Not just financially, but you've earned the right to enjoy the results of your work." After several weeks of research, I settled on a Porsche 911 Turbo S in classic silver. The $145,000 price tag represented a fraction of my net worth at that point, but it still felt significant, the largest purely personal purchase I'd ever made. When I told Eliza, she immediately supported the decision. "You've been so focused on building security for us and for our future," she said, rubbing her slightly rounded belly. "Enjoying one beautiful thing that brings you pleasure doesn't change who you are." The day I went to the dealership to pick up the car was surreal. The salesman handed over the keys with reverence, explaining features I'd already memorized from my research. Sitting in the driver's seat felt simultaneously extravagant and right, a tangible manifestation of a journey that had begun in that tiny dorm room at MIT, with Ryan and a stack of coding books. On impulse, I stopped the car at a scenic outlook on the drive home. The late afternoon sun cast perfect light on the silver paint and leather interior. I rarely posted on social media, maybe once every few months, but something compelled me to take a photo of myself leaning against the car with the Boston skyline in the background. I added a simple caption: "Some dreams take longer than others. Grateful for the journey and everyone who made it possible." I tagged Eliza and Ryan, then put my phone away and enjoyed the drive home, the powerful engine responding to my slightest touch. I thought nothing more about the post until later that evening, when notifications began flooding my phone. Friends, colleagues, and former classmates all offering congratulations. I scrolled through them casually, until one stopped my heart momentarily. Margaret Wilson had commented, "Beautiful car, Kurt. You've done well for yourself." Minutes later, my phone rang with my mother's number, a number that hadn't appeared on my screen in over 8 months. "Kurt," she said when I answered, her voice carrying that familiar tone of controlled pleasantness. "Your father and I were just talking about you." "Really?" I couldn't keep the skepticism from my voice. "Yes, we saw your post. The car is lovely. European engineering is so superior, isn't it? Your father always said you were smart with technology matters." The backhanded compliment was so typical I almost laughed. Before I could respond, she continued, "We think it's time we had a family meeting. Tomorrow would be best. Could you come to the house around 11? The abruptness of the request after such prolonged silence was jarring. "A family meeting about what?" "Family matters," she replied vaguely. It's best discussed in person. You'll be there? I found myself agreeing before fully processing what was happening. After hanging up, I stood in our living room, phone still in hand, trying to understand the strange feeling in my chest, a mixture of that old childhood hope and adult wariness. Eliza looked up from her book, immediately sensing my discomfort. What is it? My mother called. They want to have a family meeting tomorrow. Because of the Porsche post, Eliza stated rather than asked. I nodded slowly. 2 years of silence, including missing our wedding, but one Instagram post of a $145,000 car, and suddenly they remember I exist. What are you going to do? She asked, setting her book aside. I sank onto the couch beside her, the implications becoming clearer. I'm going to go, but I think I need a plan before I walk into that house. Sleep evaded me that night. I lay awake beside Eliza, staring at the ceiling, mentally rehearsing various scenarios for the family meeting. Past experience suggested my parents rarely initiated contact without agenda or advantage in mind. The timing, immediately after seeing tangible evidence of my financial success, felt too convenient to be coincidental. Around 2 in the morning, Eliza rolled over and placed her hand on my chest. Your thoughts are so loud they're keeping me awake, she said softly. Talk to me. I sighed. I'm trying to figure out what they want. Money, she replied simply. The question is, what you want from this interaction. Her directness was clarifying. What did I want? Not their approval, I'd finally outgrown that need. Not a restored relationship built on financial interest rather than genuine care. I want them to see me, I finally said. Not the car or the company valuation or whatever they think they can get from me. Just me, as I am. And I want to not care so much whether they can do that or not. Eliza nodded thoughtfully. Then you need boundaries, not defenses. You're not going in to fight or to please. You're going in to be exactly who you are, and let that be enough. We talked for another hour, developing a strategy that wasn't about anticipating their moves, but centering my own values. By dawn, I had a clearer sense of purpose, and an unexpected idea that Eliza immediately supported. After a quick shower and breakfast, I headed to the office earlier than usual. Ryan was already there, reviewing code in his usual morning ritual. You're early, he noted, glancing up from his screen. I filled him in on my mother's call and the impending family meeting. Ryan's expression darkened as I spoke. His own relationship with his parents was close and supportive, making my family situation particularly incomprehensible to him. I can come with you, he offered immediately. Moral support or just to show them what actual family loyalty looks like. I smiled at his protectiveness. I appreciate that, but this is something I need to handle myself. Ryan nodded, then shared something he hadn't before. My aunt was like your parents, absent from my cousin's life, until he started making real money as a surgeon. Then suddenly she wanted to reconnect. Know what he did? What? Set up a trust for her that paid out small amounts monthly but kept her from accessing the principal. Said it was the only way to have any relationship that wasn't constantly about money. I considered this approach. Did it work? Partially. The relationship has boundaries now, which is better than nothing. Ryan paused, studying me. But your situation feels different somehow. It is, I agreed, an idea crystallizing. I don't want to manage their access to my money. I want to reset their understanding of what matters. The rest of the morning, between meetings, I made several calls to put my plan into motion. By 10:30, I had what I needed. I left the office, telling my assistant I'd be unreachable for a few hours. Driving to my parents' house in the Porsche felt like an intentional statement rather than the innocent act it had been the day before. Each mile closer to Wellesley brought a flood of memories. Driving home from school events they'd missed, returning from college to a house that never quite felt like home, the last visit when I'd invited them to my wedding. I rehearsed what I wanted to say, focusing on maintaining emotional equilibrium regardless of what transpired. This meeting wasn't about convincing them to be different or making them understand their impact on my life. It was about standing firmly in my own truth and values. The night before, Eliza had helped me prepare a document, not the one they would be expecting, but one that represented what I truly wanted to contribute to the family legacy. I had it in a simple envelope in my jacket pocket. Approaching my parents' neighborhood, I felt my stomach tighten with familiar anxiety. I pulled over a block away, turned off the engine, and closed my eyes. I thought about the child Eliza and I were expecting, about the kind of father I was determined to be. I thought about Ryan and our team at work, about Eliza's parents who called weekly just to check in. I thought about the family I had built through choice and commitment rather than blood. Taking a deep breath, I restarted the engine and drove the final distance to my childhood home. As I pulled into the driveway, I caught movement at the living room window, my mother, watching my arrival in the car that had suddenly made me worthy of a family meeting. For the first time in my adult life, I walked toward my parents' front door feeling neither hope for their approval nor fear of their indifference. I was simply Kurt Wilson, exactly as I was, finally comfortable in that identity regardless of how they saw me. The interior of my parents' house hit me with unexpected sensory familiarity, the subtle scent of my mother's preferred lemon furniture polish, the slightly too cool air conditioning, the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. It was as though the house existed in a time capsule, while my life had transformed completely outside its walls. "Kurt?" My mother greeted me in the foyer, her eyes quickly moving past my face to peer through the window at the Porsche in the driveway. "Right on time. Your father is in the living room." She was dressed as though for a luncheon at the country club rather than a family meeting, tailored slacks, silk blouse, pearls at her throat and ears. Her hair was the same perfect ash blonde it had been for decades, though surely maintained with more effort now that she was in her 60s. I followed her to the living room where my father stood to shake my hand formally, as though greeting a business associate rather than his son. "You're looking well," he said, giving me a once-over. "Success agrees with you." "Thank you," I replied simply, taking a seat in what had always been my chair during family discussions, a slightly uncomfortable armchair positioned so that both parents could easily observe my reactions from the couch. Mom poured coffee from a silver service on the side table, another remnant of my childhood. Important conversations in this house always happened over coffee served in the good china, regardless of whether anyone actually wanted it. "The car is certainly impressive," she began, handing me a cup I didn't want. "European engineering really is exceptional." "It drives beautifully," I acknowledged, determined not to play the game of pretending this meeting was about catching up. "I read about your company in the Boston Business Journal," my father interjected. "Security software for financial institutions, smart sector, consistent demand and clients with deep pockets. We've worked hard to build something valuable," I said, intentionally using we to acknowledge Ryan's equal contribution, something my father consistently overlooked. "Hard work and lucky timing," he commented. "You got into cybersecurity just as it was becoming a priority. Good instincts there." The familiar diminishment, attributing my success more to luck than skill or vision, might have stung years ago. Now it simply confirmed what this meeting was really about. "I'm curious," I said, placing my untouched coffee on the side table. "What prompted this family meeting after nearly 2 years of minimal contact?" My parents exchanged a glance that I recognized from childhood, the look they shared when navigating a social situation requiring coordinated response. My mother smoothed an invisible wrinkle from her slacks. "Well, we've been meaning to reconnect," she began, her voice carrying that practiced warmth she used with casual acquaintances. "When we saw how well you're doing, it seemed like a good time." "A good time," I repeated neutrally. My father cleared his throat. "The truth is, Kurt, we have a family situation that requires discussion. As you know, investment banking has changed significantly in recent years. Some ventures that seemed secure have proven otherwise." I waited, already anticipating where this was heading. "Your father made some investments that haven't performed as expected," my mother explained delicately. "Significant investments. The market can be unpredictable," I offered, giving them the opening they clearly wanted. My father nodded gravely. "We're facing some financial adjustments. Nothing catastrophic, but the house carries a second mortgage that's becoming challenging to maintain." "I see," I said, maintaining a neutral expression. "And you thought I might help with this situation?" Your family, my mother said, as though that simple fact explained and justified everything. Family supports each other through difficult times. The irony of this statement hung in the air between us. I let the silence stretch uncomfortably before responding. Family supports each other, I echoed. Like attending important life events, wedding ceremonies, perhaps? My mother's expression tightened. That Mediterranean cruise was booked well in advance, Kurt. These things happen with scheduling. Things happen, I agreed mildly. Like suddenly remembering you have a son when you see evidence he might be in a position to help you financially. My father's face flushed. That's unfair. We've always been supportive of your computer interests. Have you? I asked, genuinely curious if they believed this. Can you name what my company actually does? Have you ever asked about my work beyond its profit potential? An uncomfortable silence followed before my mother changed tactics. We saw on social media that Eliza is expecting. Our first grandchild. That's wonderful news. This pivot to my pregnancy news information they had clearly gleaned from social media rather than direct communication confirmed everything about their sudden interest. They were cataloging my assets. Successful company, expensive car, impending family expansion, all potential leverage points. Yes, we're very excited, I replied, offering nothing more. A grandchild changes everything, my mother continued. Family becomes even more important. We should be coming together, especially now. Coming together, I repeated thoughtfully. I agree that family is important. That's actually why I came today. My parents exchanged another glance, this one carrying visible relief. They thought I was acquiescing to their unstated request. We knew you'd understand, my father said. Just a temporary situation, until some investments mature. 100,000 would bridge the gap nicely. Of course, we'd structure it properly. Loan documents, interest. The naked request confirmed every suspicion. No pretense of reconnecting for emotional reasons. No acknowledgement of past absences or hurts. Just a transaction between parties who happened to share DNA. I reached into my jacket pocket and withdrew the envelope I'd prepared. Both of my parents' eyes fixed on it with barely disguised eagerness. I brought something I wanted to share with you, I said, holding the envelope without immediately handing it over. A decision I've made about family and legacy. My mother smiled. That's very thoughtful, Kurt. I placed the envelope on the coffee table between us. Before you open this, I want to be clear about something. I'm not here to buy a relationship with you. Whatever is in our past remains there. What matters to me now is going forward with clarity and honesty. My father reached for the envelope with the confident movement of someone accustomed to getting what he wants. As he opened it and scanned the contents, his expression shifted from anticipation to confusion. What is this? He asked, handing the document to my mother. It's the establishment document for the Wilson Family Foundation, I explained calmly. I've endowed it with $1 million as a starting point. My mother looked up sharply. A foundation? We don't need charity, Kurt. We need practical assistance with our financial situation. The foundation isn't for you, I clarified. It's dedicated to supporting children and young adults who experience emotional neglect within families of financial privilege. It will fund counseling services, mentorship programs, and educational opportunities. The silence that followed was profound. My father's face reddened further while my mother's paled. This is your response to our situation? My father finally managed. Creating some charity instead of helping your own family? This is my response to our entire family history, I corrected gently. I'm creating something meaningful from experiences that shaped me. The foundation will carry the Wilson name forward in a way I can be proud of. And our financial situation? My mother pressed. I'm not giving you money, I stated simply. Not because I can't afford it, but because it wouldn't solve the actual problem between us. If you're genuinely interested in having a relationship with me, with Eliza, with your future grandchild, that has to be based on something more substantial than financial convenience. We're your parents, my father said, as though this fact alone constituted an irrefutable claim. Yes, I agreed. And I'll always be your son, But the nature of our relationship going forward is something we all have to choose intentionally. It can't be transactional. I stood, signaling my readiness to conclude the meeting. The foundation launches next month. You're welcome to be involved if you'd like, to help shape something that might help other families avoid our patterns. But with or without your participation, this is the contribution I've chosen to make to the Wilson legacy. My mother's composure cracked slightly. You'd rather give money to strangers than help your own parents keep their home? I'd rather invest in healing than enable patterns that hurt all of us, I corrected. You have options for your financial situation: downsizing, restructuring your investments, adjusting your lifestyle. What you don't have is the option to suddenly have a son only when it's financially convenient. My father stood abruptly. This is how you repay everything we've given you? Your education? Your upbringing in this home? I met his gaze steadily. I'm grateful for the privileges I had. I'm also clear-eyed about what was missing. The foundation acknowledges both realities. I moved toward the foyer, neither rushing nor lingering. I'm willing to have a relationship with you both that's based on mutual respect and genuine interest. If that appeals to you, you have my number. If what you actually want is financial support without the emotional investment, I've made my position clear. My mother followed me to the door, her voice lowered. Kurt, be reasonable. Family helps family. When you were growing up, we gave you everything you needed. I paused at the threshold. Everything except your presence at moments that mattered. I'm not punishing you by declining to write a check. I'm establishing boundaries about what kind of relationship I'm willing to have. And if we lose the house? She pressed. Then you'll make adjustments, as most adults do when facing financial challenges. But you won't face homelessness or hunger. You're asking me to maintain a lifestyle, not prevent catastrophe. I stepped outside, feeling the warm spring air on my face. The foundation information includes my contact details. If you want to be involved, or if you're interested in knowing your grandchild without financial strings attached, you can reach me there. Walking to my car, I felt neither triumph nor sadness, just a profound sense of alignment with my own values. For perhaps the first time in that house, I had spoken my truth without filtering it through anticipation of their response. Whether they could hear it was no longer my primary concern. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror to see them standing in the doorway, looking somehow smaller than they had when I arrived. The image struck me as an apt metaphor for how perspective changes when we stop magnifying others' power over our self-worth. The drive home from my parents' house felt completely different from the journey there. Where anxiety had accompanied me on the way to Wellesley, a profound sense of peace followed me back to Cambridge. The weight of unresolved expectations and unacknowledged hurts had lifted, replaced by the clarity of honest communication and established boundaries. When I walked into our condo, Eliza was waiting, her expression a mixture of concern and curiosity. "How did it go?" she asked, meeting me at the door. I wrapped my arms around her, feeling our baby's small bump between us. "Exactly as expected," I replied. "They needed money. I gave them boundaries instead." We settled on the couch where I recounted the entire conversation. When I described presenting the foundation documents instead of a check, Eliza's eyes filled with tears. "You transformed something painful into something healing," she said. "That's who you are, Kurt. That's why I love you." The emotional release I'd been holding back finally surfaced. In our living room, surrounded by photos of chosen family, Ryan and his parents, Eliza's large clan, our team at milestone celebrations, I finally grieved fully for the relationship with my parents I'd never had, and now understood I never would. "I'm not angry anymore," I realized, wiping my eyes. "I'm just free." Eliza nodded. "Freedom comes when you stop expecting people to be who they can't be and start accepting who they actually are." That evening, I called Ryan to update him on the meeting. His immediate response was protective rage on my behalf, followed by profound appreciation for the foundation concept. "You're breaking the cycle," he said. "Not just personally, but potentially for hundreds of kids who might get support that changes their trajectory." The foundation became a meaningful focus over the coming months. We assembled a board of directors that included therapists specializing in family dynamics, educators who worked with high-achieving students from emotionally distant homes, and adults who had navigated similar childhood experiences to mine. The Wilson Family Foundation established its mission to recognize and address the invisible wounds of emotional neglect in environments of material plenty. My parents did not contact me for 6 weeks after our meeting. When they did, it was my father who called, his voice lacking its usual authoritative tone. "We've listed the house," he said without preamble. "The market is strong enough that we should clear the mortgages and have enough to purchase something more appropriate for retirement." "That sounds like a sensible plan," I replied neutrally. A pause followed before he continued. "Your mother and I have discussed your foundation. We'd like to know more about it." I explained the foundation's mission and initial programs, keeping my expectations measured. When I finished, another long pause followed. "It's addressing something real," he finally acknowledged. "Something we perhaps didn't understand." It wasn't an apology, or even a direct acknowledgement of our specific family dynamics, but it was possibly the most honest statement my father had ever made about emotional matters. I accepted it as the beginning of a different kind of conversation. Over the subsequent months, my parents did downsize to a comfortable condominium. My mother attended one foundation board meeting as an observer, saying little but listening attentively to personal testimonials from young adults who had benefited from similar programs. Our relationship didn't transform into the close family bond depicted in heartwarming movies. There were no tearful reconciliations or sudden deep conversations about the past. Instead, we established a measured connection based on clearly defined boundaries and modest expectations. They asked about the pregnancy with what seemed like genuine interest. When Eliza and I learned we were having a daughter, my mother sent a handmade baby blanket with a note mentioning it was similar to one she had made for me before I was born. It was a small gesture, but carried significance precisely because it wasn't accompanied by requests or conditions. 6 months after the family meeting, our daughter Catherine was born. My parents visited the hospital briefly, bringing a tasteful gift and interacting with appropriate grandparent enthusiasm. When they held her, I saw something in their expressions I recognized from my own first moments holding her, a mixture of awe and terror at the responsibility of nurturing another human being. Perhaps they had felt that with me too, I realized, but lacked the emotional tools or models to translate that feeling into consistent presence. Understanding this didn't erase the past, but it helped me view them with more compassion, as people with their own limitations, rather than as deliberate architects of my pain. The true healing, however, came through my daily choices with Catherine. Each time I put aside work to fully engage with her, each time I responded to her cries without hesitation, each time I marveled at her smallest developments, I was actively creating the childhood experience I wished for her, rather than replicating the one I had known. One Wednesday afternoon, about a year after Catherine's birth, I faced a critical decision. Our company was preparing for an important client presentation the next morning. Last-minute issues had emerged that would typically keep me at the office late into the evening. Simultaneously, Catherine was taking her first tentative steps, a milestone Eliza had excitedly texted me about. Without hesitation, I delegated the presentation preparations to our capable team and drove home by 5, arriving in time to witness Catherine's wobbly journey from coffee table to couch. The pure joy on her face when she saw me watching made every professional accomplishment pale in comparison. That evening, as I rocked her to sleep, I whispered the truth that had become my guiding principle. Success isn't measured by what you accumulate or achieve. It's measured by whether you show up for the people who matter, consistently and without condition. The wealth I had built provided security and opportunity, but the real treasure was the freedom to prioritize presence over acquisition, connection over status, and authenticity over appearance. My parents had chosen a different path, one that ultimately cost them the deepest joys of genuine relationship. The foundation continued to grow, eventually establishing scholarship programs, therapy services, and mentorship networks across New England. My parents' involvement remained peripheral, but respectful, perhaps the most authentic engagement they were capable of offering. Ryan and I eventually sold our company for a figure that ensured financial security for generations. The day after the sale finalized, We both agreed the most meaningful outcome wasn't the money but the community we had built and the problems we had solved together. Looking back on my journey from emotionally neglected child to emotionally present father, I realized the greatest gift my parents inadvertently gave me was the opportunity to define family on my own terms, not as a biological obligation, but as a sacred commitment to genuine presence and unconditional support. The Porsche still sits in our garage, driven occasionally for pleasure rather than status. It represents not just success, but the pivotal moment when I finally stopped seeking approval and started enforcing boundaries. Sometimes the most valuable things money can buy aren't possessions, but the clarity that comes from recognizing when relationships are conditional. If you're watching this and something in my story resonates with your own experience, remember that your worth isn't determined by those who failed to see it. Family is ultimately defined by consistent presence, not by blood or obligation. The cycles of emotional neglect can be broken when we choose to be the people we needed when we were younger. Thanks for staying with me through this story. If it touched you in some way, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more journeys of healing and transformation. I'd love to know in the comments, what boundaries have you established that helped you build healthier relationships? How have you transformed painful experiences into growth? Your story matters too, and this community is here to listen. Until next time, remember that showing up, consistently and authentically, is the greatest gift you can give to those you love.